According to a 2014 Gallup poll, Americans' trust and confidence in mass media to report fully, accurately, and fairly is at an all-time low. This chart shows Democrats' trust has declined 11% in the last 14 years, while Republicans dropped 12%, both just 1% shy of their all-time lows. At the beginning of my research, I found this infographic detailing 6 corporations who control 90% of the media we read, watch, and listen to. Using the info from this discovery helped me decide which media outlets I would analyze, compare, and contrast with one another. For my research, I used archival and content analysis to analyze both conservative and liberal mass media homepages in an attempt to find common trends. Through these methods, I looked to gain a better understanding as to why public trust has been in such decline for the last 14 years. My first examination was of CNN on the eve of Election Day in 2008. The most prominent headline on the homepage read, "One Day Left, Still Undecided," which was a story highlighting the potential influence of undecided voters. The story content did not appear to have any biases, and the coverage was written very objectively. Taking a closer look at the latest news links provided, the updates highest up on the list are the election-related content. These are followed by stories with shock value type headlines, including ex-Playboy Bunny faces cat cruelty charges and mouse found baked into pack of hot dog buns. Stories with little to no news value. Viewing Fox's homepage, the first headline and story I read was, "It's Decision Eve," a story which I found not to be biased at all. Continuing down, some of the smaller election-related headlines were a mixture of content claiming McCain was gaining ground, Obama lead widens, and could voter fraud steal election? The first bit of bias I discovered was in the Say What Joe article, which criticized Joe Biden for comments he made during a rally. Although this was not the main story, the headline link was one of the larger prominent ones. The latest news tab contained 3 links to international news stories, while the rest were domestic. Analyzing both CNN and Fox websites, I was surprised to note that much of the content was similar. Specifically, the latest news sections of both websites contained stories which had little to no actual hard news value. The main common topic was clearly the presidential election. Both outlets also had election-related video content as well. Like Fox, the Wall Street Journal is another media outlet owned by conservative media mogul Rupert Murdoch. This screen grab is from August 19, 2010, when Operation Iraqi Freedom was officially declared over. The Wall Street Journal's featured stories that day pertained to drug violence in Mexico, Facebook's new location feature, and nestled below there was a link to a story about the end of Iraqi freedom. In the left column under What's News, there was a few highlighted business and finance headlines pertaining to American companies. To the right, separate stories detailing events in Afghanistan paint perceptions of danger to readers. Separate headlines below appear to have negative connotation to them as well. Forbes Business Magazine's webpage had a unique layout with a marquee of headline stories ranging in topics. The first of 5 pertained to Intel buying out a security software company, which was shortly rotated with a story on Facebook's future of offering an IPO. Forbes' page did have a link to an article about the last troops leaving Iraq, but the content was unavailable. Slightly down the page, Forbes had a list of hyperlinked stories just as the rest of the websites had. As shown on the slide, many of those stories were related to the McAfee buyout by Intel. Within my research of Forbes, I realized that there was minimal coverage towards international related stories. Again, when comparing the Wall Street Journal to Forbes, I was surprised to notice the more international coverage the Wall Street Journal provided. My guess is that Forbes' circulation stays more within the North American continent, while the Wall Street Journal reaches out to a larger international audience. Between the two, I was unable to identify any substantial bias between either. My final examination was of the New York Times on the evening of the Aurora, Colorado movie theater shootings on July 20th, 2012. As this was clearly the main story, the homepage highlighted different aspects of the shooting, including research into the life of the shooter, an interview with the brother of a victim, a timecast of the attack, and words from authorities. Below the main coverage of the shooting, the content changes to a variety of other news. As shown on the slide, other top headlines include stories about continuing violence in Syria, scientific breakthroughs in technology, and the prosecution of the former president of Chad. Amongst these headlines, other content included international, local, and U.S. news. Not to be confused with the New York Times, the New York Post, which is also owned by Rupert Murdoch, had a complete different portrayal of the shooting. The image and headline focused on unveiling the shooter himself. Directly below in the latest news contained updates and different aspects relating to the shooting. On the left, the Post 10, the first and second stories detailed pop culture. Continuing down under latest news, more updates from the shooting detail tweets from the massacre and 911 transcripts from the first initial calls. Below those separate stories, the content then changes to New York-related news pertaining to baseball and basketball. The New York Post's website was visibly more sensationalistic and looked to draw in readers with shock content style headlines. Though both the New York Times and New York Post are both well-known media outlets, it was easy to identify which of the two covered topics of actual news value. The Times content was much more professionally composed for more intellectual newsreaders, while the Post looked to attract readers with shock value style headlines and pop culture related news. Throughout my research of conservative outlets, headlines tended to have sensationalistic wording as if the goal were to entice audiences into reading. Headlines and content did contain slight biases, but not as much as I had hypothesized, specifically in reference to Fox. International story coverage was substantial, though most content pertained to violence or unrest within these outside countries. Liberal mass media outlets tended to have more straightforward and objective headlines and contained domestic and international coverage within their homepages. A common similarity between the liberal and conservative sites were content related to popular culture, as well as stories with shock value and sensationalistic headlines whose content had little or no news value. Unfortunately, I believe these stories are what help draw in audiences of all age within our society.